So tonight we're going to be covering the story of the Chet Egel, the sin of the golden calf. We're going to talk about it from the perspective of Aaron HaKohen, Aaron the high priest. What exactly his role was in the story? Was he fully innocent? Was he at fault? How exactly do we see him? And of course, most importantly, what can we learn personally for our own Judaism, for our own service of Hashem? What can we learn practical, perhaps, lessons from the story of the Chet Egel? So just for context, let's speak out maybe a little bit. What happened in Chet Egel? So the reason why I wanted to speak about this is because I was reading the Parsha over Shabbos, right? It was Parsha's Kisisa. And it's like, it's such a crazy story. Like, what? How do you make heads or tails of like what the Jewish people did, what Aaron's role was? It's very, very hard to understand these things. So I decided to look a little bit into it, see what our sages have to say about Aaron HaKohen. What was his mistake? What did he do right? What exactly is going on? So just read the psukim a little bit. So again, the context is Moshe Rabbeinu just went up to Har Sinai, and he was there for a long time. And it says the people started getting restless, impatient, like, when's he coming down? What's going on? Because I'll say that the Satan showed them an image of Moshe Rabbeinu being, having passed away. It says that they didn't know what to do. Their leader, Moshe Rabbeinu, wasn't with them anymore. So it was in this context, it says, the people saw that Moshe delayed in descending the mountain. And the people gathered around Aaron and said to him, "Rise up, make for us gods who will go before us. For this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what became of him." So they're in this state of confusion. What's going on? Moses, we're lost. It's like a chicken without a head a little bit. It's really what the Jewish people are.
Into their old behavior of idol worship.
What is that?
They lapsed into their old behavior
right.
of idol worship.
Yeah, exactly. So Aaron said to them, okay, remove your golden rings that are in the ears of your wives, your sons, your daughters, and bring all your gold to me. Bring all this gold jewelry to me. So the entire people unburdened themselves of the golden rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. So they all took off their nose rings, their earrings, their necklaces, and different things. And they brought all of this gold to Aaron HaKohen. He took it from their hands. He bound it in a scarf. He kept it all together. And it says he made it into a molten calf. Then they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt." So they're already it seems like they're relating to this golden calf, to this Egel Hazav, as the God that brought them out of Egypt. So then it says, Aaron saw and built an altar before him. Aaron called out and said, "A festival to Hashem is going to be tomorrow." Essentially, he's still mentioning Hashem. It's also a curious thing, too. They arose early the next day and offered up elevation offerings. They brought peace offerings. People sat to eat and drink, and they got up to sport. It says, L'tzachik. They got up to make merriment, it sort of means. So at this point, Hashem is realizing what's going on at the bottom of the mountain. He says to Moshe Rabbeinu, what's up with these people? The Jewish people, they're so stiff-necked, they're so stubborn. And then this basically created the situation of the Chet Egel, the sin of the golden calf, which Chazal tell us we're still living through the consequences of the sin of the golden calf. We're still living with those consequences. It says Hashem, in his great mercy, could have destroyed the entire Jewish nation. Instead, the punishment for the sin of the golden calf is meted out little by little over the long thousands of years of history of the Jewish people. So any suffering we're seeing nowadays could be traced back to the Chet Egel. In fact, Chazal tell us even more. It could have been right after receiving the Torah, the Jewish people would have been on the level, I mentioned this last week, could have been on the level of Adam HaRishon prior to the sin of eating from the Eitz Hadas. That means that our task would have almost been complete in the world. We would have been basically living in the times of Mashiach, if not for this terrible sin of the Chet Egel. So this was pretty much the worst thing that's happened in the entire history of the Jewish people, that's led to all subsequent suffering of our nation. And all of this happened, it seems like, through the medium of Aaron HaKohen. That's what it seems. So let's...
Wasn't the golden calf, I guess it's a midrash,
Yeah.
it was a product of Egyptian,
It's a great part we're going to talk about.
how's it they were able to reach out after so many months away from in the Exodus. So they thought that was a curious.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of these things. So there's a lot of midrashim on this topic. So we're going to talk about a few of the items that Chazal, the sages in the Talmud and the Medrash, discuss how to explain what Aaron HaKohen did. What was the sin exactly? What was he trying to do? That's what we're going to talk about. So first, let's just get a little background. Who was Aaron HaKohen? So obviously Aaron HaKohen, Aaron the priest, was the brother of Moshe Rabbeinu. And as such, he was on a very, very, very high level. Of course, he was a prophet. He was a Navi. It says he was such a tzaddik that it was in his merit the Jewish people had the Ananei HaKavod, the clouds of glory, that was with them in the desert for all the 40 years in their wandering in the desert. So he was a meritorious enough person to have this schus for the Jewish people that Hashem gave them these clouds of glory that we commemorate during Sukkot. Moreover, there's a Chazal, it says, Masechah Shabbos, Tractate of Shabbos, it says that he fulfilled the whole Torah. He was someone on such a level, he fulfilled every detail of the Torah. And it says that his death, when he passed away, it says it was as hard for Hashem, his death, as the breaking of the Luchos. Or the Luchos was a tremendous tragedy too in its own right. That's another, something else we could talk about another time. But the breaking of the Luchos was a terrible tragedy for all of the Jewish people. But Chazal say that Aaron HaKohen's death was on the level of the breaking of the Luchos. Such was the level of Aaron that he was commensurate to the Luchos. Another statement in Chazal, they say, the world exists only for Moshe and Aaron. He was meritorious enough, he was a tzaddik enough, the entire world existed just for him. And in Pirkei Avos, we know that Aaron HaKohen is considered meritorious for his being a Ohev Shalom and Rodev Shalom. He would pursue peace in all situations. He would bring peace between friends, between husband and wife, between all different people. He was constantly pursuing peace, and he was praised for this. So Aaron HaKohen was an extremely, extremely high tzaddik. He was a very, very special tzaddik, a tzaddik known for his ability to bring shalom between warring parties, a tzaddik who, it says, he brought all of this merit to the Jewish people, the Ananei HaKavod. The entire world existed for him and his brother Moshe. And of course, he was the high priest. He was the Kohen Gadol. And all of his descendants were the Kohanim Gadol and Kohanim in general. So this was Aaron HaKohen. This was the righteous person we're talking about. So it's taken on as a given in Jewish tradition that Aaron HaKohen was a complete righteous tzaddik. He was shalom, complete in every way. And if we see that he made a mistake or so did something wrong, or the Torah seems to allude seems to say that there was an aver that he did, we have to understand it according to his level, obviously. And of course, it says in Parshas Eikev, in Sefer Devarim, obviously, that the sin of the Chet Egel was associated with Aaron, and it says Moshe Rabbeinu is retelling the story. He's recapitulating the story of the Chet Egel. He's telling the people basically all the events that happened while they were in the Midbar. And he says, Hashem became very angry with Aaron to destroy him. So I prayed also for Aaron at that time. Your sin you committed, the calf I took, and I burned it in fire. I pounded it, grinding it well till it was fine as dust. I threw its dust into the brook that descended from the mountain. So the Torah itself alludes the fact that Hashem was extremely angry with Aaron HaKohen. So despite all of his incredible merits, he ended up making some sort of mistake with this Chet Egel, which obviously we have to understand according to his level what the mistake was. Why did he come to this? This was the worst tragedy that ever befell the Jewish people. Like I said, it led to all subsequent suffering of the Jewish nation. How could it be that Aaron HaKohen could succumb to such a thing? How do we understand this? So there's an incredible medrash. It's actually brought in a Rashi on Kisisa. So I'll actually maybe read it from the medrash itself because it's really interesting. So this is in Medrash Rabbah. It's actually in Parshas Tzav in Sefer Vayikra, the book of Leviticus. And it discusses the context which brought about the sin of the golden calf, the Chet Egel. So it's going on a pasuk, it's going on a verse, where the verse says, Vayar Aaron saw, Vayivin Mizbeach Lefonov. Aaron saw something, and he built a Mizbeach in front of him, it says. So the Medrash analyzes this pasuk and gives three understandings. What did Aaron see that prompted him to build a Mizbeach? In the story of the sin of the golden calf, what did Aaron HaKohen see that made him want to build this altar, a Mizbeach? So the first interpretation, it says Vayar, which anyone knows Hebrew knows, Vayar is the same letters, Vayar, to see, is the same letters as fear, Yira. It's the same letters, Yud Resh Aleph. So seeing is related to fearing. So it says that Aaron actually saw something that happened, made him afraid. What did he see? This means that he was afraid because of the one who was slaughtered before him. He saw Miriam, the prophetess, Miriam Hanaviah, had a brother, a very big tzaddik also. His name, she had a son, not a brother, a son. Miriam had a son named Hur. He was a prophet. He was a very big tzaddik. And Hur, before they went to Aaron, before the people went to Aaron, they went to Hur and they told Hur, make us an idol, make us a idol to worship. He said, no, of course not. That's a terrible affair. I'm not going to do that for you. So what did the people do? They killed Hur. They killed this very, very big tzaddik, Hur. So Aaron saw what happened. He saw that Hur tried to reprimand the people, and he ended up being killed for it. So he said, now what's going to happen? They're going to kill me. And if I try to protest, they're going to kill me. And not only is my protest not going to work, not only am I going to be killed, my protest isn't going to work, and they're going to end up building the calf anyway. So in order for them to not have two levels of guilt upon them, that they should both be murdering again and serving idol, in order that both of those two things shouldn't happen, he decided to do it himself, to be part of the process himself, so as to limit their guilt to just the idol worship. Because he saw that if they would both murder him and end up worshiping the golden calf, they would be destroyed. Or at least they would be sent into exile immediately, and that would prolong the Jewish people suffering even more than what actually happened. So, again, according to this interpretation, he feared because he saw them already having killed Hur, the son of Miriam. And he said, I don't want that to happen to me, because if that happens to me, not only are they going to still make the golden calf, they're also going to have an additional sin of having murdered me too. So in order that shouldn't happen, I'm going to go along with what they want me to go along with, so as to minimize the people's guilt. That was the thought process of Arna Klein. That's the first understanding that Chazal say, that the sages say in this medrash. So another interpretation along a similar line says, Ma Ra, what did he see? And we're still going on this verse, that he saw, and then he built an altar, he built a mizbeach. So what did they see? So this interpretation doesn't interpret Vayar as fearing, it interprets it as seeing. He saw almost like a vision. He saw the future a little, or he saw like he had like a hat. He had like a good idea in his head. That's what he saw. He perceived the following: if the people build the altar, then they're all going to work together. This one's going to bring a rock, that one's going to bring a rock. They're all going to come together, and they're going to build this altar very quickly. They're going to finish their work all at once. The altar's going to be done very quickly. If I build it, I'm going to delay. I'll stall. I'll dawdle. I'll kvetch. I'll try to, drag my feet. And hopefully by the time I finish the altar, Moshe Rabbeinu is already going to be down, and they won't have the opportunity to actually sin by worshiping the golden calf. So again, we see that Aaron HaKohen, as part of this process of the Chet Egel, he actually wanted to stall. He wanted to stall so that they ended up not doing the sin to begin with. In fact, it says, why did he when they said, let's make an idol, what does he tell the people? He says, bring me all your children, your wives, gold jewelry. Bring me their earrings, their nose rings, their bracelets. Why does he, what's he doing? So he says he saw also again, what's going to happen? They're going to go to their wives. They're going to say, give me your bracelets, your rings, your jewelry. They're going to go to their daughters and sons and ask the same thing. And there's going to be fights. And that's going to delay them a lot. And because of that delay, they're not going to end up having the chance to actually worship the golden calf. So again, according to this understanding, Aaron HaKohen was trying to stall. He was buying time so that Moshe Rabbeinu would come down before the people would actually have the chance to go and do this terrible sin. That's the second understanding that the Medrash relates to us. Fine. Another thing. So he said, what did he see? A third understanding said he saw Amar Aaron. He said, if the people are going to build the altar themselves, they're going to be the ones to build the altar themselves. They're going to be the ones who Hashem will attribute the sin to. The foulness of the sin will be attributed to them. It's better that the foulness, the ugliness of this sin be attributed to me and not to the people of Israel. Therefore, I'm going to be the one to build the Mizbeach. I'll be the one to build the altar. I'll be the one to be involved in this sin of the golden calf and set up the whole thing so that it's not attributed to the Jewish people. Meaning, he was taking on, almost like, you have in baseball, right? Person takes a pitch, he leans into the pitch and gets hit. He knows it's gonna hurt. But it's called, what's it called? It's called taking one for the team. Taking one for the team, right? For the greater good, even though he knows it's gonna hurt. He's gonna be punished, it's gonna be a sin. But he realized, if I don't do this, then the Jewish people, the sin is gonna be attributed to them. They're gonna have to deal with the consequences of the sin. They're gonna be able to handle it. They're gonna be destroyed. So instead of that happening, I'll take one for the team. I'll be the one to be involved in this sin of the Chet Egel. And that'll hopefully alleviate some of the judgment, some of the strictness that would otherwise be poured upon the rest of the Jewish people. So this was part of Aaron HaKohen, his kavana, his intent, when he involved himself in this Chet Egel, when he built the Mizbeach, when he built the altar.
As a corollary, couldn't it the fact that he asked the people, the women anyway, to donate all their jewelry.
He told the men to go get it from their wives.
Now, okay, but that the jewelry was a constant reminder of having lived in Egypt and
Oh, so you're saying they would have been more willing to give it up or less willing?
I guess I'm thinking of the less willing because natural greed.
Right. They don't. No one wants to give up their jewelry, their valuables. So these are the three understandings that Chazal give to some of the actions that Aaron took. That really is he was either trying to delay, he was trying to limit their guilt by limiting them to just one sin, or he was trying to take the sin on himself so as to spare the people from that guilt. And that I call that, it's like taking one for the team. It's for the greater good almost. So interestingly enough, the Medrash gives a parable, a mashal, to illustrate what happened here. And you have to know what additional information, what new insight is this parable giving to us? So let's talk about this parable. It's a very interesting parable, a mashal, and I think we can learn a lot from it. So it says, this whole story with Aaron HaKohen taking the sin on himself, trying to take the sin off the backs of the Jewish people and take on the guilt for himself, can be compared to the following. It says there was once a prince, right? Everything has a king and a prince, right? Every mashal has to be like that. There was once a prince, and he started becoming very haughty. He started getting a lot of gaiva. And he said to himself, you know what? I want to be king. I'm going to go and I'm going to slash my father with my sword. I'll murder him and I'll become the king. That was the gaiva of this prince. So this prince, young haughty prince, had a caretaker. And the caretaker understood that, oh, what if this all happens, it's not going to be good. So he said to this prince, he said, you know what? Don't go through all this effort or murder your father. Give me the sword, I'll do it. I'll do it. So it says the king saw this whole story happening. The king peered at him and said to him, I know what your intention was, even though it seems, maybe to the outsider, it looks like he was plotting to kill the king. That's what he was saying. He said, give me the sword, I'll do it. But the king said, I see what you're doing. I understand what lies behind your action. You aren't merely trying to kill the king. You are thinking that it's better that the foulness of the sin be attributed to you and not to my son. Better you should get the sin, not my son. My son's the prince. The king loves the son, obviously, even if the son has evil intentions. And you wanted to take the sin and attribute it to yourself. You wanted to take one for the team. So he says, as a reward, I swear by your life, you shall never depart from my palace. That's what the king tells his caretaker. By your life, you are never going to depart from the palace. You shall eat the remnants of my food, of my table, and you shall receive 24 gifts from me. That's what he says. That's the mashal. Yeah. So what's this referring to at the end of it? You're not going to leave from the table. You're going to get these 24 gifts. What's that referring to?
24 gifts.
Yeah, do you know what that refers to? It says there's 24 special merits that a kohen has.
Okay.
So there's 24 special merits that a kohen has. So the Medrash is saying a very interesting thing, a fascinating thing. It's almost shocking. It's saying that since Aaron HaKohen did this, since he was the one who to involve himself most of all in this sin of the golden calf, in order to take the guilt off the people, in that merit, the sense that he loved and cared for the people enough to take one for the team, for that reason, he merited to become the high priest and to have all of his descendants become priests. Specifically because of his involvement in the Chet Egel, which is shocking because it says that Hashem was angry with him. And of course it was a sin. So how are we supposed to understand what was the sin? It's saying that for this reason he was made the Kohen Gadol. This seems shocking to me.
Context is everything.
Context is everything. Okay, good. Interesting. So again, We're seeing Aaron HaKohen, he took one for the team. He ended up being the one to take on the full measure of the sin. He was the one to involve himself in this terrible act of Avodah Zarah to take on the foulness of the sin, so that the foulness of the sin isn't attributed to the Jewish people, Hashem's children. And of course, Hashem was angry at him. Of course, it was a sin. But at the same time, he merited the priesthood. And his children all merited the priesthood. All because of this act that he did. So what are we supposed to take from this? How are we supposed to understand this? Seems like a person could do something wrong and be rewarded for it. It's like, what are you supposed to understand? Yeah.
Hashem knew that all of this was going to happen, so why it was not clear why he was angry at him.
It's a good question. That's a good question. We'll talk. Maybe we can talk about that later. It's an interesting question. So, how do we understand this? So, there's a very interesting piece from the Be'er Yosef, and he says essentially the following. He says, on the one hand, it's true. Aaron HaKohen did something that protected the Jewish people. And when Hashem was searching for who the right person is to be the Kohen Gadol, to serve as the high priest, to be that intermediary, to be the in-between almost, between the Jewish people and Hashem, to serve as that, to serve that role as sort of the one coming to appease Hashem on behalf of the Jewish people, there was no one better than Aaron HaKohen, because he was willing to sacrifice himself,
Right.
to sacrifice his own soul, to sacrifice his own life on behalf of the Jewish people. So it wasn't necessarily a reward per se. It was a little bit of a reward, but more so it was a recognition that this is the person who has that sense of responsibility for the well-being of the Jewish people. That's Aaron HaKohen. That's the person who has this sense of achrayus, of responsibility. But at the same time, good intentions, as good as they may be, can never rationalize a sin. Something that, according to the letter of the law, is a sin, is an aveira, at the end of the day, should not be done. So even though Aaron HaKohen's heart was in the right place, and he had a certain virtue that Hashem was able to recognize from this whole action that he did, at the same time, he should never have done it, in as much as it went against the will of Hashem. Good intentions can never rationalize a bad act. Because the measure of right and wrong is the Torah, is halacha, and that's all we have to measure right and wrong. Once we take it into our own hands, then we could, God forbid, mess up, make an incorrect judgment, and do a sin as terrible as the golden calf. And that doesn't contradict, because at the same time, there was still a virtue that Hashem was able to recognize in Aaron HaKohen, but that could never rationalize a sin. Hopefully that dichotomy is clear. They're both true at the same time. He had a virtue, it's true. In fact, the Kohanim, the Kohen Gadol, is an interesting halacha in the Torah. It's called that when you have a person who murders b'shogeg, who kills by accident. There's certain situations where a person kills by accident. He has to flee to a place called the Ir Miklat, a sanctuary city, right? And he would have to stay there. And interestingly enough, the Torah says he stays there until the death of the Kohen Gadol, or the high priest. He would stay in the city until the death of the high priest. Why until the death of the high priest? So, initially enough, it says the mothers of the high priest would come and they would make food, make clothing, and different things for these killers who people killed b'shogeg, killed accidentally. They weren't, the best of the best people in the world. And they would come and they would bake cakes and do things for them. The mothers of the Kohanim, they would almost try to bribe these people not to pray for the death of the Kohen Gadol. It's a very interesting thing. So the way Chazal understand it, the way the Mefarshim, the commentaries talk about it, is the reason why their prayers have merit in a sense, that they make sense, they're logical, that they would pray for the death of the Kohen Gadol, is almost because it happened, this act that happened on the watch of the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol is responsible for the praying for the service of the Jewish people. He has a responsibility to the whole Jewish people to make sure things go well for them. If something bad happens, if tragedy happens, it's on his watch. He's responsible for it. That's why the Torah says, when he dies, that's when everyone goes free. It goes on his watch. He was the one responsible. So once he dies, okay, that's when it ends. So we see the Kohen Gadol has this incredible responsibility. So Aaron HaKohen had this virtue. He had this recognition of his responsibility to the Jewish people. At the same time, like we mentioned already, that can never rationalize doing something that is an aver. So what are we supposed to understand? So we're supposed to realize first and foremost, when it comes to Torah, when it comes to halakha, there's black and white, there's right and there's wrong, and every person has to have someone they can consult with to know what's right, what's wrong in different situations. We can't always know ourselves. Sometimes what's right for one person will be wrong for another person, etc. Everyone's on a different level. Everyone has things that they need. Everyone has extras that they may need to take on to protect themselves. Everyone needs to know what's right for them, what's wrong for them. And those things that are right and those things that are wrong, that should be almost black and white. Basically black and white. It just may change from person to person. So having things black and white, knowing what's right, knowing what's wrong. Secondly, we should have an understanding that it's very important to have a sense of achrayus, to have a sense of responsibility for the Jewish people. If you see that people are doing things that they shouldn't be doing, you have to do it in an effective way, but you should feel a sense of responsibility. I have to help these people. I have to take responsibility for them. Now, it may not mean going up to them and, throwing the book at them. Most likely it doesn't mean that. Maybe it means praying for them, thinking about them when you're praying, maybe doing an extra mitzvah for their merit, but just having a sense, I'm achrei for this. I'm responsible for this. Every person could have that. It doesn't have to be a big thing in an obvious way. But if you see someone doing something that's what they're talking shul, they're speaking lashon hara, they're not dressing modestly, all these different things a person might be doing, okay, you don't have to throw the book at them. That might not be the right thing. But a person can say, okay, I'm responsible a little bit for this. Maybe I can say an extra kapitel tehillim for them, something like that. And you may not even ever have to mention it to them. In fact, maybe it's better you never mention it to them. But you can take on to be achra, you can take on to be responsible for other people and their actions in the same way that a Kohen Gadol, Aaron HaKohen, we see was taking on that responsibility for people to help lower the guilt that they took on. Lastly, obviously, Aaron HaKohen was the great peacemaker, and he made peace between one Jew and another Jew, and he also made peace, in a sense, between the Jewish people and Hashem. So that's what we should also be trying to do. We should always try to find good points in the Jewish people and be able to present those good points to Hashem himself. They'll say, oh, look, Hashem, I just saw this Jewish person doing a mitzvah. I just saw this Jewish person sacrificing for Shabbos in some way. I just saw this Jewish person hold back from speaking lashon hara. And when a person finds a lot of merits within the Jewish people, he presents them to Hashem. That's making peace between Hashem and the Jewish people. Obviously, Hashem knows what happened, but when we recognize it and show and tell Hashem about it, Hashem gets nachas from us that we're recognizing those good points in the Jewish people, and He'll also act with that recognition as well. And that's one of the keys to being a Melitz Yosher, a positive speaker on behalf of the Jewish people, someone who can bring merit to the Jewish people. So there's many other lessons, many things also, but those are, I think, those three. That halacha should be black and white, that we should try to bring merit to the Jewish people by, if you see someone doing something maybe they shouldn't be doing, being able to pray for them, doing an extra mitzvah for them, something like that. And lastly, to make peace between Hashem and the Jewish people by finding good points in every Jewish person you meet, even if it may not be so obvious. That's one of the great ways to become a Melitz Yosher for the Jewish people. If anyone has any questions,